What I really want people to avoid is thinking that eliminating gluten from your diet is the answer and that that's going to be the magic cure, because that's certainly not the case. It might be something that's irritating your gut, but very rarely is gluten itself the root cause, unless in the case, again, of celiac disease, but the root cause of all health ails. I would say that consuming it can, again, for sure cause further issues. When it comes to eating disordered and disordered eating too, there's actually a group of people that are often left out of the equation altogether. We believe that eating disorders are started in the brain as mental disorders or disorders of some, again, emotional sort or a manifestation of OCD in some cases, or perfectionism. When it comes to eating disorders, what's not often talked about is that what happens inside of our gut can actually influence our food behaviors. So if we have something like a parasite, that actually can influence our cravings. The feeling of having distension around digestion can make us want saltier or sweeter foods to help with motility. So actually, what happens inside of our gut can influence our mental decision to have certain foods and can influence our anxiety around food too. So while there are absolutely times when eating disorders derive from mental reasons, there are times when eating disorders can derive from physical reasons too. And if we only explore the mental component of eating disorders and disordered eating and ignore the fact that dysbiosis in the gut and other conditions of our body can cause those disordered thoughts, we actually won't be able to get to the root cause of what's going on with us. So what this looks like is if someone has disordered eating and it's deriving from a physical condition, if we say, hey, you have to include all foods fit, you have to include these foods, they're not actually going to be able to get better through just the mental support alone. And there are many people who, again, even consumption of gluten itself can create for some people those physical discomforts. And not only physical discomforts, I mean, it can literally alter the way that we crave foods and think about foods. It can alter our brain function. And if it alters our brain function, again, we have to look at the food itself too, and we have to look at what the physical self is telling us. So if you are a person also who did some sort of elimination diet and actually noticed your relationship with food got better from it, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I have seen that happen. What I'm not advising is if you have an active eating disorder, please do not start cutting things out of your diet without a practitioner's help. What I'm talking about is exploring, hopefully with a practitioner, especially if you have a diagnosed eating disorder, what else we can do to look at the cause of our eating behaviors. Because yes, there is this hugely mental component to eating, and there's also a hugely physical component to it as well. So yes, I have literally seen clients while consuming gluten or other foods that were not working well with them and their digestive environment, I have seen their relationship with food improve through elimination of those foods, which again is so counter to what we hear all the time, which is that if you cut out any foods, you develop an eating disorder. Well, I've seen people cut out foods and develop a better relationship with food. It is entirely possible, but it has to be done strategically and gently at the same time. So it's really important to understand that nuance. And it's also very confusing. And I know none of this is black and white. And I always ask you, please be in the gray area with me. Please sit in that discomfort of that middle ground, knowing that all of us are so individual. When I think of elimination diets, what I'm generally thinking of is what I see in functional medicine and functional dietitians' offices. Also what I see in conventional medical offices, which is you basically have a diagnosis like IBS and the doctor will give you a quote unquote, let's say a low FODMAP plan, maybe a specific carb diet, a GAPS diet, a histamine intolerance diet. There's a couple issues with handing someone a diet like that. First of all, it absolutely can create food fears. So while I'm saying that cutting some foods out selectively and intentionally for a short period of time, usually a 30-day window, can be part of an overall strategy for help, just cutting foods out of your diet for a very long period of time is not helpful at all. And the reason it's not helpful is a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is, like I said before, if you're going on a low FODMAP diet, and FODMAPs which is a specific different components of carbohydrates that can potentially cause gastric distress for people. Wheat actually happens to be a FODMAP, which is why I also believe it's possible people experience gut distress from wheat. It's another proposed mechanism. There was one really good study that substantiated that also. So if you remove all FODMAPs from your diet, and let's say, again, that fire isn't burning as strongly, but whatever the fire of inflammation isn't burning as strongly, but whatever damage was done to your gut prior from FODMAPs or from other inflammatory events is not going to be instantly fixed from you removing that. Yes, it might reduce your symptoms for some time. The other issue is our body is a body of true efficiency. So if we cut out too many different food groups and too many foods, our body does not lack the ability to digest the food, but it can become harder to reintroduce those foods the longer that you leave them out. And the goal for any diet should be to be eating as diverse of real foods as possible. So cutting out, especially when it comes to something like a histamine diet, a low histamine diet, is you're eliminating citrus fruits, fermented foods, all these things that can be really strongly helpful for your digestive system and your immune system. So I think also when thinking about these diets and approaching them, thinking about eliminating one thing at a time might be a much better move, and for a very specified period of time to see what's working and what isn't. When we just cut a bunch of foods out, it doesn't help us to understand what's working and what isn't. And it really can create new food fears. So that's my advice when approaching these also is, slow and low and one thing at a time, see how it makes you feel. I think that the evidence is strong for gluten specifically, as a starting place, that again, there's a lot to be explored in ways of the potential mechanisms and issues that gluten mechanisms and modes of action of why gluten might cause an issue. And we have a decent amount of research to understand that also this leaky gut component, those little holes in your infantry can really cause a potential issue. And then also the pesticides and all of those other glyphosate issues along with gluten. So I am not generally afraid to replace gluten in the diet with other foods, either gluten-free varieties or naturally non-gluten containing foods. There's a big difference between eating gluten-free cupcakes for lunch every day and consuming sweet potatoes instead of having bread, right? There's a 100% chance that any person can get the nutrients they need from non-gluten foods. Rice, and if it was even from a cost perspective, rice and oatmeal are as inexpensive as bread is. Taste-wise, I mean, the gluten-free varieties is a different conversation too. I think, there's some brands I really like, and it's possible to find those swaps if you want to do the gluten-free products. So removing gluten from our diet this is something that I need to eliminate right away from our brains, which is that it does not cause any sort of deficiencies. So it's not like it's dangerous in any capacity to remove specifically gluten from the diet, especially the gluten that we're seeing, again, consumed in America currently. If removing gluten from the diet does cause disordered eating or an eating disorder, or I wouldn't say cause, but does correlate for someone with disordered eating or an eating disorder, it might not be the right time for you to make, if you feel that's you, it might not be the right time to make that diet change.